My name is Crispin. My nickname is in the neighborhood, Sunnyside, is Bean. Cruz. My father was Federico. My mother was Consuelo. We came to Sunnyside about 1943. I think that's the year that we arrived here. So the reason we came was when my grandmother was very sick at the time. So they got here probably first part of 43. They were here just a short time, went to work for the magnesia plant, a little plant right across from the railroad tracks on Maumee Street. And they were making the shells, casings, for the service, for the soldiers, Army. So when she got sick, we came from Corpus Christi, Texas. My father worked for the Shell Oil Company back then, and also helped my uncle out in the bakery down in Corpus Christi. So that's the earliest papers that I've been able to find was 43 late. It had to be late 43. They got some ration books in 1944 that I found. Rations for gas, sugar, or whatever they had at that time. And the stamps in that collections I found when they were 1944. So they must have been here late. We got here probably late in 43, and then well, we never left after that. I mean, we stayed in Adrian after that, and my dad went to work after that. So, and he went to work for what they call the bomber plant, which is Bone 24. Today it's a GM plant on Beecher, and they made wings for the planes and shipped the wings from here to Willow Run Airport, where they assembled the fighters and the fighter planes. And I think it must have been like the B-617s or them planes back then. So, and that's how we stayed.
What was the connection with Adrian and Corpus Christi? How did your parents know about Adrian?
You know, I tried to find out because my grandma and grandpa left San Antonio. That's where that's the last thing I heard was that then my grandma and grandpa Jesus Lozoya, they moved from there. They came up to Ohio, to a town called Rudolph. I think it's Rudolph, Ohio. I think is where it was. And from there, they found out that there was in Michigan there was jobs in factories. So they made the trip from wherever Rudolph is. I haven't looked it up yet. Rudolph, Ohio, to Adrian, and found a rental there in it was the last house on the left on Dorothy Street, an old house, and they found a rental there, and that's where they lived. And they had to walk only 2 blocks to go to this plant to work. Bone 13 was across the street. So that was how they got here, that I know. My grandmother got sick during that period, and of course they called, and back then it was everything seemed to be done by telegram back then. So Mom got a telegram that Grandma was really, really seriously ill, and I remember that we had two suitcases, two suitcases for the whole family. There's 3 of us, Mom and Dad and I, and we got on a train in Corpus Christi, and I don't know how we ended up coming to Chicago. And it was back then there was wooden seats on the train. So I'm talking early 40s, and we got on a train in Chicago that went from Chicago to Toledo, and we had a depot here in Adrian. So we came to Adrian. It had to be, I'm thinking it was probably the holidays during 1943, and then we stayed at Grandma and Grandpa's house at the Reynolds, an old home, real old, And we never left. Never left. Grandma took a while to get better, and so Dad got some job right away. They hired him back then. And so he went to work for the Bone 13. Bone 24, not 13. He worked for Bone 24, and at the same time got a second job at the sugar beet factory in Blissville, Michigan. His job over there was guarding the German prisoners that they were bringing. And that's in 44. So 44, 45. And Dad had a job of watching them. He was guarding them. It was crazy because Dad didn't speak German whatsoever. He didn't speak English, let alone German. So the German didn't speak Spanish or English. And here these prisoners and him were still communicating. They asked Dad for silver quarters, silver dimes, silver whatever. And they made Dad some jewelry. Rings, little bracelet for my mother, all these things. We got pictures of the German prisoners. I never even thought of bringing them. I should have, because they signed them on the back. Looks like some of them were officers, and some of them were just regular soldiers. But they did that for. I can't remember when the war ended. They released everybody. Dad came back. In 46, he got the job at Tecumseh Products. And him and a group of men from Sunnyside went to work for Tecumseh Products. I think there's like 5 of them. There's Arturo de la Cruz, Dad, Parra, I think it was Parra, and Manuel. I can't think of all of the names of the
Manuel Gonzalez.
Gonzalez, yeah, all them. They used to ride together from Sunnyside to Tecumseh Products. So that's how we ended up here also. You know, not only my grandparents, but that's how we ended up here. In 1947, my dad built the house that we lived in, with the help of all the neighbors in Sunnyside. So they built our house.
Is that across the street where they lived?
Yeah, across the street from Grandma and Grandpa's. That house is finally got demolished quite a few years ago. But Grandma and Grandpa's where they rented. So anyway, we ended up in Adrian. I started Catholic school then in 1946 at St. Joseph's Catholic School, and started first grade there, and stayed there till graduated from there, and then went on to Catholic Central. He graduated from Catholic Central 58, and then went on to college, Adrian College, till 59. Actually, about almost 2 years there, plus some summers, and went to service after that. So,
what branch?
I went in and up my draft, ended up in the United States Army, and ended up going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And because of my cooking and bakery background, ended up in their school of culinary at the Armory at Fort Leonard Wood, and graduated from that school of culinary, and then was assigned to one of the mess halls there in Fort Leonard Wood. Came home first time. Let's see, that would have been 1959 for Christmas, and had orders to go to Korea, and caught pneumonia. And so I ended up in the hospital for quite a few weeks. I'm thinking probably 4, 5, 6 weeks for the pneumonia. And they cut my orders then. Instead of going to Korea, I couldn't go. That was over already. they said, well, you're going to go to White Sands, New Mexico. And so I ended up at White Sands, New Mexico for about 18 months there. Got out, quickly made a tremendous amount of rank. I couldn't believe it. I ended up being an E5, which is equivalent to a buck sergeant. By the time I got out, it was 21. I got out of the service 21 months early to come back to college. So ended up coming back, going back to Adrian College again, and that unbelievable date is November the 11th. I've never been able to forget that because it's Armistice Day. So November the 11th, I get some officer and some sergeants at the house, and my mother goes, knocks on the door, and she says, Dad, Crispin, there's some high-ranked officer, and they look like sargentos, sergeants, and they're here to see you. And I said, well, tell them I'll be right there. And I went, and they said, he said, you're AWOL. About over a month ago, he said, you received a letter from the president, and you've been reactivated, and you did not respond. So you're AWOL. I said, well, I already served my time. I didn't think I had to answer. And they said, yes, you do when you receive any letter like that. He said, we're here to pick you up, and we're going to send you to Alabama. And I said, okay, get your duffel bags. If you got it packed, let's go. And so they did. They took me to, back then it was Willow Run, to Willow Run Airport, and we got there, and they shipped me out. There's quite a few of us, and they sent us stuff to Alabama, Fort McClellan, Alabama, which was at that time they were teaching. It was mostly what the heck can I call this? It had to do with chemical warfare is what it was. And so I got there, and they said, next morning I went to report, and they said, well, you're the sergeant for the mess hall for the 392nd out of Adrian, Michigan. I said, wow, what a coincidence, out of Adrian, huh? They said, yeah. I said, so you need to go over there and report over there. And so I went over there, and first of all, I wasn't a sergeant, I was a Spec 5. And they said, no, you are a sergeant. So they said, we'll get your stripes, and you're going to be the head of the mess hall. So not knowing how to run a mess hall, I had to go get some help from other companies, and all the other companies, their sergeants were probably master sergeants or quite up in rank. And they said, you're what? And I said, I'm the sergeant for the 392nd. I said, how old are you? And I said, 21. And they said, at 21, you are a mess sergeant, huh? And I said, yes. And they said, well, we've never heard of this before. You've got to be the youngest one we've ever had on post that you were. So here I am with the 392nd, and I ended up being their mess hall sergeant. I had 250, 260 men that we had in the company, and my responsibility was to get them fed morning, noon, and night. So did a good job. My cooks were great. I had good people working for me, and so that was quite a blessing. We ended up doing well in the mess hall. A lot of appreciation, a lot of certificates that we did extremely well. It's just unbelievable. We had generals coming, like I said, colonels, generals, high-ranked, very high-ranked people coming in, and they like Mexican food. So on Sundays I do tacos and enchiladas and burritos, and they really loved that. They thought that was a great thing to have. So I fed them all that time. due to that, I think we ended up with a lot of certificates of appreciation for what we did for all the cooks and myself. So that was quite a deal. Got out of there after a year, and then got sent back home. So came back.
Can we go back to your childhood and tell us where did you play in the neighborhood, or what activities you were involved in school?
We were very fortunate in our neighborhood. My dad decided that we should have lights on the corners in the neighborhood, each block. So we went and got a petition. We had lights. We did get the lights. He was also responsible for. We had petitions for gas, natural gas. We had a petition for sewers and water. We got the sewers. Never got the water that I know of. But anyway, because we had a light in each corner, that's where we played at night. But the thing that was fantastic was we had a deputy sheriff, a sergeant from Lenawee, Sergeant Smith, and he took care of us. He'd come down at night and see how we were doing, what we were doing, playing. We got to play ball out underneath the lights. We got to play marbles. I was state champion marble. They took us to a tournament in Eden Rapids, Michigan, and I ended up getting a ribbon. I don't know what ribbons are now, but we had ribbons in that we won. And there's 3 of us that went, and all 3 of us ended up first and second, and the 3rd guy didn't make it, but anyway. But we had first and second place at the marbles. So we played marbles. We spent a lot of time, we would call it kicking the can, the kind of toys that we had most of us had a bicycle, so we had bicycles. We played out as much as we could. My dad then decided to open up a bakery at the house, and he got all the permits and permissions and all that bit, and that kind of took time out of my play. I could play till about 5 o'clock, and then around between 5 and 6, come in and eat, and then after that I had to clean up from the bakery.
How old were you and what year?
That had to be probably, I was trying to guess when we put that had to be probably 1940, it had to be about 48 or 49, because my sister had been born already. She was born in 46. So it had to be right around 48, 49 when Dad put the bakery in there on Dorothy Street. And so we had the bakery, and that took quite a bit of my time to come in, clean up. I usually worked till about 9 o'clock at night. And after school, you just came home and got to play a little bit and play ball with the guys and whatever, football or whatever out there. And then right after that, my job was to go and clean everything and mop the floors and wash the pans and all that. After a while, Dad got the idea that maybe I should start mixing, because he got home by 11:30. So he said, "Why don't you mix the doughs for me?" And he taught me. And so I would mix not all of them, but some of them. Pan de huevo, the biggest seller we had. They call them molletes. We had them. Polvorones, which is the cookies. Empanadas, all the doughs for the empanadas and all that. So I had a job, and I was every night, starting probably around 9 o'clock. I'd be done by 10:30. Wash everything and then go to bed. So It was quite it was good because it kept me working. It kept me from getting in trouble out with the rest of my friends. Most of my friends were good kids. You know, we had a few that got in trouble, you know, like everything else. But the kids that I hung with, Cruz, Rufus, Pedro Regalado, Ernest Torres, all these, Ralph Acala, all these kids were, I mean, they were good kids. We never ended up in trouble. And Sergeant Smith, again, that sergeant for the deputy from Lenawee, kept track of us. He was always there. He was always doing his rounds and seeing what we were doing, making sure that we didn't get in any trouble. So I think he was one of the main factors that later on in my life, I ended up being a deputy sheriff. So.
Tell us about that. Before we go there, let me ask you about celebrations as a kid, Christmas, weddings, and things like that.
Christmas, any holiday, any family party or family gathering is very important to us. We celebrated every holiday as a family. Every Sunday was sacred. Sundays, we didn't work Sundays. Dad had people that came in, opened up the restaurant and the bakery back then. But every Sunday was church. Very, very, very Catholic. All my family is very. We were born Catholic. First of all, we don't have a choice of religion. When we're born, we're baptized right away within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. When we're born, we were baptized in the Catholic Church. So we're Catholic right off the bat. So, and I ended up, of course, at Catholic schools and that. But we ended up, my dad was, my mother were very, very active in the church, especially St. Mary's, which is mostly Mexican people there. The Virgen de Guadalupe group, all these groups. They were very, very, very busy with them parts of the church. So Sundays were sacred. We'd go to church, and we always went out to eat. My dad was a fanatic for restaurants. He loved a good steak, and so we were always going for steak someplace. And it didn't matter the drive. The drive was no problem. Detroit was no problem to go for a steak. Toledo, wherever we found that there was a good steak, he'd say, "Well, let's go there." So Tecumseh was one of our favorite places too, every Sunday. But it was a family gathering every Sunday. At Christmas and that, we celebrated Christmas on the 24th. And Grandma and Grandpa and that, they expected everybody to be together on Christmas Eve. And we were. That was a big, big, huge thing in our family. Christmas is big. All the other holidays, Easter, we always celebrated Easter. And Dad started on Friday with Easter. He'd cook fish on Friday, or some type of fish or shrimp or whatever it was for dinner, because Friday started the Holy Week. So we were pretty busy as a family. We expected to be together. Even after I got married, we'd make a day for my family, and we'd make another day for my wife's family. So, and her family was the same way, very, very tight. When the mother-in-laws or my mother, whoever, said, we want you to be here, we were there. There's no excuse. You had to be there. So, with my mother-in-law, we did the same thing. we all went, we all met at their houses and did the same thing with my family. So holidays, birthdays, it was very, very, very sacred. We had to spend the time with the family. Families, today it's quite different today. Kids our children are too busy. Not only that, but they're distant now. They're not close enough where we could spend time with them. And that happens today. Back then, if you talk to people, families back then, they all worked in the area. I worked in Adrian, so even after I got married, I worked in Adrian. So it wasn't until my dad kept coming around to the bank when I was a banker, and he kept saying, "Why don't you give up banking and go into something you really know how to do, go into the restaurant business?" And then we made the move to Hillsdale. So in Hillsdale, oh my God, we're 35 miles away. That was a long ways for us. So, but we still kept the same thing in the family. We still kept that Sunday sacred, even in my family after my dad passed away. And, my mother would not live with us, come visit every weekend, and we'd go out for dinner. Same pattern, we used to do the same thing that we did before, get together on Sundays. So it's something that was taught as a young person, that family is number one. You don't, whatever your family needs you, you're there. And so I tell my kids that, family's number one. Anything happens, you take care of your family first. So, and that's been instilled in us. So.
I'll go back. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but you're talking about how Sergeant Smith might have motivated you to go, or inspired you to go into become a deputy.
I always wanted to be a cop when I was a kid because of Sergeant Smith. I thought that was the greatest thing. I don't forget my father's words, because in order to be a cop, you had to be clean. No drugs, especially as you're growing up. So, and he always, Dad was the type of person that always advised you. We worked together. I mean, him and I grew up with him, and he was always telling me, I don't want you ever to get involved in drugs. Don't ever. The drug business, you might see a lot of people that are in drug business, and they seem to be doing extremely well and all that. And all of a sudden, even their families are gone. So, and that can happen. So I don't want you ever get involved in the drug business. And the other thing I don't want you ever to do is get involved in gambling, because gambling is the same thing. You gamble your life away, you gamble everything, kids and children too. So he says, so don't ever get involved in that stuff. We need you. The reason your mother and I work so hard is that you can have a better life than we have. So that's why we send you to school, and we want you to get educated. So that was that part. So I was, by the time 15, 16 years came around, that type of age where, especially in my neighborhood, there was a lot of experimental stuff. Guys were smoking, drinking, whatever. So I did my best never to get involved with that stuff.